I built this pedal board that basically let me replace my Bandmates. Stoked to talk a little bit about my gear today and what I'm actually using on this upcoming tour that I'm on. So for anybody that's already seen my band Shake Out live before, you already know that I run this crazy setup where I run my one guitar into 2 guitar amps and a bass amp. And then I also do a lot of live looping so that I can fill out my sound as much as possible and just tour with a drummer, essentially. So let me just start off by saying that my rig has gone through a lot of transformation over the years, and it's taken me a long time to kind of get it to where it is now. I used to use like a ton of different little stomp boxes and did a lot of tap dancing, but I kind of finally have it to a place where I can press a lot fewer buttons and perform more. And I also have a lot more of a compact pedal board these days. So let me kind of just demo out what the rig does, and then I'll get into the nitty gritty of kind of how I make it all happen, so that maybe some of y'all might get into live looping, or maybe consider cutting down on some of the bandmates you bring on tour. Because we all know that more musicians can sometimes be a huge headache. And I apologize for the audio in this video if it's a little wonky. I'm kind of just using my camera's microphone, because my studio, it's kind of in disarray right now, so everything's not set up, unfortunately, but I still wanted to show off my rig, so bear with me. All right, so let's take a look at what's on the pedal board first. So I have the brand new Boss RC-600 loop station that just came out, and that's actually the newest addition to the board. It's been really cool so far, and it's kind of helped me to make this even a little bit more compact. I have the Line 6 HX Stomp that I use for all of my guitar tones and effects, and also as my splitter for the different amps. I have the Morningstar MC6 that I use for just extra controls of both the looper and the HX Stomp. And I have the Boss WL50 wireless system, and everything is sitting on top of a Temple Audio Trio 21 pedal board. So as I mentioned, how I get such a big tone is I split my one guitar out to multiple amplifiers. So I have 2 guitar amps. I have the orange CR120C, which is the Crush combo, which is a pretty cool 120 watt combo amp. And then for my other guitar amp, I have this little crate block from the early 2000s that I bought for really cheap on eBay, which I honestly just use as a power amp to power these 2 PPC 112 orange cabinets. I actually don't even plug into the front of this amp. I plug into the effects loop instead. Because realistically, my guitar tone comes from the settings and the HX Stomp, so I just really needed something to power up the cabs, and this does the job. And then for my bass amp, as of now, I'm using a Galeon-Kruger Backline 600, and it's plugged into an orange OB115 bass cabinet. And the signal that gets sent to that bass amp is specifically just an octave down of my guitar that I do through a polyphonic octave effect. So let me just kind of show you what this board is capable of, and then I'll break down how exactly I make it all happen. So let's actually start off with the bass signal. So I have a way that I can kind of turn on and off either the bass or the guitar. And then I use a polyphonic octave effect, shifted down an octave to just go out to my bass amp. So you get something like this. And since it's polyphonic, you can also play chords with it, and it tracks pretty well, so you get something that kind of sounds like this. Which on its own doesn't sound the best, but when it's layered with the guitar, it sounds pretty sick. So yeah, that octave down signal is kind of only going out to this bass amp. But let's talk about my guitar signal. So as I already mentioned, I have the 2 guitar amps on each side. And I know it's kind of hard to hear some of the nuances through my camera's microphone, but basically I set one of these guitar amps up on each side of the stage when I play live. And it definitely fills it out. But I also actually have the capability to play one guitar amp at a time. So that's this amp. And that's this amp. But again, together we have, which is pretty cool. So right now I have the bass signal muted, but when I hit this button, you get something like this. And it ends up sounding pretty big with just one guitar. So when I play live, I do a lot of live looping as well. And I kind of write all my songs with the intentions that if there's ever a lead guitar part, the rhythm gets looped somewhere in the song beforehand. And with the RC-600 as my loop station, I'm actually able to set the click for each song, and then I just route that click track out to the headphones so I can play along with it, and so can my drummer. So even though I'm not going to totally demonstrate that right now, I'll show you kind of what the loops sound like. So it gives me a lot of capability because I realistically can loop anything. If I wanted to just loop a bass line, I could totally do that. But if I wanted to loop the full guitar and bass signal, I can do that too, and then just play lead guitar over it, which is pretty dope. And with the Line 6 HX Stomp, another great thing I can do besides just mute guitar or bass is I can add multiple effects onto one button with the snapshots mode. So for example, if I play my regular rhythm tone like this, in just one button click like this, I have a lead tone which not only mutes my bass signal, but it also boosts my guitar signal and adds a delay at the same time. Which is something I use a lot because when I use the looper and I loop my rhythm signal, it has the bass tone in it. And when I want to play lead guitar over that, I don't want the bass signal to be coming through with my lead parts. And one final pretty cool part about this setup is that I also run vocal harmonies with it. So in the Boss RC-600, I actually plug my mic into the mic input, and then I turn on the harmony effect, and I have it all set to a button right here on my MIDI switcher, which allows me to have live vocal harmonies even though I don't have any actual backup singers. So let's head over to my computer and I'll show you guys exactly how I set this all up in the HX Stomp, and then I'll show you how the board is all wired up to kind of make this all happen. Okay, so this is the patch for my song See and Never, but all the patches are pretty similar. Sometimes the effects will just be different depending on what the song needs. But how it works is right here we're looking at the input where my cursor is. That's where the guitar gets inputted into the device. And then you see that I have this split right at the input. So this top line is my guitar signal. You have the volume pedal that turns on and off, and I have that on a foot switch to be able to mute the guitar essentially. And then I go into a distortion, a noise gate, my delay for my lead parts, and then a preamp. And then that gets outputted to the main outputs on the HX Stomp. So this is kind of how I'm able to separate the guitar line from the bass line, because I have this other second split off that has the pitch shifter, and you can see it's shifted down -12, which means it's shifted down a whole octave. And then just a regular compressor, again, another volume pedal so I can turn the bass on and off. And then this one gets outputted to the send. So there's an actual send jack on the side of the HX Stomp that I'll show you in a bit. But that's how I send the bass out of a separate output. And then they just get sent into the looper left and right separately so that I can just have them go out to the different amplifiers. Okay, so now that you've seen a patch in my HX Stomp and you kind of see how the guitar signal is laid out with the split signal, the guitar signal, and the bass signal, I'll show you how I kind of wire everything up and make it all work. Okay, so I'll walk you through my chain from beginning to end, from guitar to the amps. So my guitar starts right here at the wireless system, and then that outputs all the way under the board, and then I have it going to the HX Stomp. And as I showed you guys, I kind of have the signal in the HX Stomp split. So the guitar signal comes out of the output and goes into the left side input on the RC-600. And the bass signal I actually put out of the send output, and that comes into the right side of the input on the RC-600. So now when I'm looking at the RC-600, anything that comes out of this left side output will come from this left side input, and anything that's coming out of the right side output comes from the right input, which allows you to split out to the different amps. So this output on the RC-600 is going to my Crush 120 combo, and this one's going to the bass amp, and it's just getting that bass signal from the Stomp. So now let me show you how I get to that third amp and a little kind of funny trick I had to do to make this happen. In the RC-600, you can set different inputs to go to different outputs. So I set it so that these inputs go to both these outputs and these outputs. And when it's plugged in stereo like this, it does exactly what I just showed you, which is this input will go to this output, and this input will go to this output. However, if you only plug in one output, it will just sum it and it'll make it mono. So essentially, if I just tried to plug this straight into the guitar amp, it would also get the bass signal in it. So what I actually did to kind of trick it into thinking it's still plugged in stereo is I plugged a little 1/4-inch adapter into the other output so that it thinks it's sending the bass signal out to something. And this will only send guitar signal out to that second guitar amp. It took me a little while to figure that workaround out, but it works. So yeah, overall this board is pretty awesome, and it's been fun to kind of constantly push myself over the past couple years to only play with one musician and also kind of just figure out how to make it simpler and simpler to do just that. When I go out and play live, I constantly get questions about my setup, and I do tend to have to troubleshoot it every so often, especially when I add new things to the board. For example, I've tried a bunch of different loopers, from the RC-300 to the RC-500, the Pigtronics Infinity looper, the Ditto X4, and they all kind of work just a little bit differently, and since my setup is so unique, I always kind of have to figure out new things every time I swap out the loopers. But I'm really liking the RC-600 so far, and I'm thinking that this is probably going to be my setup for quite a bit of time, which I'm excited about because I can just do the thing that I really want to do, which is just go out and play and make music. I hope this video was kind of interesting and cool for anyone that plays guitar, maybe wants to get into live looping, or is really just trying to do as much with their instrument as possible. If you like the video, please like and hit the subscribe button for weekly punk rock music and punk rock advice. And maybe come out and see me play with Shakeout live one day, and you'll get to see this thing in action. Cheers.